The world around us is a complex place, filled with countless details and information. In this world, we have to navigate and make decisions. And exactly for those tasks, mental models can help us. In this introductory video, we will cover the basics of mental models, gradually shifting from the theory of mental models to practical examples of using mental models in our everyday lives. A mental model is a framework or thought process in our head that can enable us to understand the world better. And in other words, here's a more detailed way of expressing it. A mental model is simply a mental compression of how something works. It applies to any idea, concept, or belief. We cannot keep all of the details in our heads, so we use models to simplify the complex into understandable and organized chunks. By Shane Parrish. Knowing now what are mental models, we move to the why. Why are mental models important? And as before mentioned, we live in a complex world. And in this complex world, we have to make decisions, small or big ones. Mental models can help us to understand reality around us or the world around us just better. And with a better understanding of this reality, we are more likely to make better decisions. Mental models also, in addition, can help us to see things from different perspectives. Basically, they are triggering us to thinking critically. And in a world which gets more and more complex and where remembering isn't just enough anymore, this is really, really valuable. Mental models don't have the goal to be applicable or right 100% of the time, but they should be practical enough to work often enough to be useful. We simplify reality into our models. By simplifying complexity, we automatically lose information and nuances. We are dealing with models, basically an image of reality. A model tries to be as close as possible to reality, but it can never be 100% reality by definition. If it could, it would not be a model, but reality itself. And because of that, we should not be blindly trusting our models and plan for error. To illustrate that, we are looking now at our first mental model. The sentence was given by the Polish-American writer and engineer Alfred Korzybski. It basically means that a model or abstraction of something is not this something itself. Models of reality are not reality itself. Or the map of the territory derived from an actual territory is not that territory itself. For many people, the model creates its own reality. It is as if the spreadsheet comes to life. We forget that reality is a lot messier. The map isn't the territory. The theory isn't what it describes. It's simply a way we choose to interpret a certain set of information. Maps can also be wrong, but even if they are essentially correct, they are an abstraction. And abstraction means that information is lost to save space. By Shane Parrish. What matters a lot is how we interpret information. This also means that we have to choose which mental models are best for which scenario. Our goal is not to fit reality into our models. Our goal is to fit our models as best as possible to reality. And keep in mind, as mentioned before, mental models don't have the goal to be applicable or right 100% of the time, but they should be practical enough to work often enough to be useful. And now we change from the theory part to the more practical part of acquiring, organizing, and using mental models. With our goal in mind to apply our models as best as possible to reality, when we just possess one model or one perspective with which we look at reality, we distort reality. What we try is to see reality as it really is. And this we can achieve when we possess a collection of basic ideas or basic mental models from many disciplines. And this leads us to the multidisciplinary approach by Charlie Munger. You must know the big ideas in the big disciplines and use them routinely. All of them, not just a few. Most people are trained in one model, economics for example, and try to solve all problems in one way. You know the old saying, to the man with a hammer, the world looks like a nail, by Charlie Munger. Charlie Munger mentioned here that we tend to try to fit reality into our models, but this is not how reality works. What we have to have are many tools, in this case mental models, which we can then apply to reality. You may say, my God, this is already getting way too tough. But fortunately, it isn't that tough, because 80 or 90 important models will carry about 90% of the freight in making you a worldly wise person. And of those, only a mere handful really carry very heavy freight, by Charlie Munger. The main way to acquire mental models is to read about them. That means to read multidisciplinary through a lot of subjects. Often the most basic mental models are found in the basic of those subjects. There are also books on mental models, and you find some recommendations on those books in the description below. Plus videos like this one here, which can give you a good starting point and a good overview on the subject of mental models. The other way to acquire mental models is what I call it, the way of the scientist. It is first to observe people or the environment around us, to collect data, to experiment, and to build hypotheses. This is arguably the much harder way, which I would say is mostly used to discover new ones. And in order to have the acquired mental models ready to use, we can put them on a special framework. A useful approach to organize mental models created by Charlie Munger is to put them on Latticework. Many of us know the feeling when we try to learn facts without basically understanding them. We tend to forget them pretty fast. And it can help us to build a latticework, a structure where we can put on those facts, in our case, put on those newly acquired mental models. With a structure behind them, we can more easily remember them, and also we can draw a connection from each look, which one is reinforcing which one, and so on. What is elementary worldly wisdom? Well, the first rule is that you can't really know anything if you just remember isolated facts and try and bang them back. If the facts don't hang together on a latticework of theory, you don't have them in a usable form, by Charlie Munger. We can constantly build and improve our latticework. When we now apply it to a given problem, we most likely see that problem from many different perspectives. With the latticework of mental models in our mind, we have now many tools with which to tackle a problem instead of just one single tool. We will look here at two mental models, which are more explained in detail in another video of this series. Normally, we tend to thinking forward through a problem, a case or decision. The mental model of inversion basically means to think backwards, to turning the subject matter into reverse. The mental process that really has worked for me my whole life, and I use it all the time, is turning everything into reverse. I figure out what I don't like instead of figuring out what I like in order to get what I like. I sometimes think straightforward too, of course, but thinking of what I didn't like and how I can avoid it has just worked wonders for me, by Charlie Munger. For a practical example, we look now at how do I apply this mental model to my life. In the topic of food, I asked myself the straightforward question of what food is healthy to eat in order to live a more healthy life. It turns out that this question was not so easy to answer, or not so clear to answer, because the science about many foods is often changing, maybe besides vegetables, but otherwise it's not so clear what is extremely healthy to eat. So I tried to inverse the whole question. I asked myself what food to clearly avoid. And this is somehow more precise and clear to answer, because it is for sure fast food and sugary beverages, for example. Those things to clearly avoid. And by inversing the question and avoiding the reverse, we come to the end goal of living a more healthy life. The model of second-order thinking involves considering not just the immediate or direct consequences of an action or decision called the first-order consequences, but also considering the potential consequences that may result from the initial outcome, called the second-order consequences. It can help us to avoid possible negative outcomes from a decision or action, which we just don't see when we only look at the immediate or the first order consequences. It is called second order thinking, but what it really means is also third order, fourth order thinking, and so on. Our decision or action is to frequently taking painkillers for temporary pain relief, for example for headaches. The first order consequence is that the pain, or in this example the headache, is relieved and we feel better. The second order consequences are that first we possibly develop a medication tolerance. That means that we need a higher dose for the same pain relief. We could develop, secondly, a dependency on those painkillers. And thirdly, it can mask underlying issues. Possible third order consequences could include health risks through long-term use, because frequently taking painkillers can cause damage to organs, and also health risk by neglecting underlying issues. Important to notice here generally is in retrospect, it is always easier to see those consequences, those second and third and fourth and so on order consequences. The skill lies in anticipating and thinking through those problems in the first place, and to think in advance of some possible side effects, on some possible consequences, like longer term consequences. This video is the start of a video series about mental models and their application. The goal is to first build an archive or library of mental models, and second, to apply these mental models to our everyday lives. Feedback is greatly welcomed and appreciated. As always, I wish you a fantastic day.